Angie Homley-Zabo here to teach you how to use coils to construct a vessel out of clay. Coil construction is one of the oldest forms of construction for clay. It's been around about as long as humans have been working with clay. It's rather simple, but we're going to take it to a next level, beyond just functional into something that can be really interesting as well. Hopefully you've watched a previous video I've made about how to construct with slab. If not, check it out. I have an example here I want to show you that combines slab and coil construction. So we can see the slab here, the flat sheets of metal. And I've used coil to build structure up off of that slab, here above the slab. I've also used coil decoratively on the base. So you can use coil in multiple different ways, but it's a beautiful way to build objects out of clay. The first step in coil construction is rolling the coils. So I'm going to show you how I do that and give you a little bit of some hints and some tricks to hopefully help you out, because it is something that sometimes my students struggle with a little bit. Those coils don't always want to stay nice and round. The first thing you want to know about rolling a coil is it's really helpful to roll a coil on a surface the coil is not going to stick to. So I have a canvas top table in my classroom that I use to do coils. If you have a piece of canvas at home, you can just tape it down to a surface, or you hold your body tight against the side of the table, pinching it between you and the table, and roll on that canvas. If you don't have a canvas, you could use another piece of scrap cloth, or you could roll on something like newspaper or a paper towel or a heavier paper. What you're going to do is take a small piece of clay. I wouldn't take a piece any bigger than a golf ball. You're going to roll it in your hands, try to even it out, and then I'm going to start by rolling back and forth and trying to make a barrel shape with my clay. Okay, so I've got a little bit of a barrel shape. Then I'm going to roll it out a little bit further in my hands, and if you notice, I'm using the flat part of my hand, the palm, not my fingers at this stage. Once I've got a little bit of a barrel shape started, I'm going to move my clay to the table, and I'm going to use my hands together. I'm going to keep all my fingers together, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to gently push and go back and forth with my hands, back and forth on that piece. When I'm rolling my coil, I'm paying attention to what I feel under my hands. If I can feel that it's higher on one side and lower on the other, I'll take a minute and try to push that low point down. As this gets a little bit bigger, I'm going to use my hands to kind of pull out, and I am using my fingers right now at this stage. I'll switch to my palms once I get this closer to done. So there's a high point, I'm going to roll it down, high point, put it up on the high point, and push and jiggle to get it down. And then as it gets bigger, I'm just going to use my hands and pull out from the center to the ends, and I try to keep pressure the same the whole way. At this point, I kind of start going back and forth with my fingers in either direction, and I'm rolling, trying to use even pressure the whole way. Sometimes when you're rolling, you'll notice that the end of your clay gets a little hollow, and I can see that here. So I'm just going to cut that off, because that's going to continue to cause me issues. Back to rolling. So I'm looking and I'm feeling, and if I see an area that needs work, I go to that area. I can also feel that it's hollow here, so I'm going to cut that end off. Now I've got it pretty long, pretty even. It's about the size of my pinky finger. So now I'm going to switch to the palms of my hands because I want to use the palms. It'll help even things out. And I can feel it's a little uneven. It's a little high on one side. It's kind of going plump, 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 plump. It's going plump, 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 plump. It is not round. So you just want to kind of use your hands to gently coax it into the right form. One thing you need to learn about clay when you're starting is it doesn't like to be forced to do things. You kind of have to gently coax it. Convince it should be round. Don't try to smash it into round. It's the same way you got to work with people. Nobody likes to be forced to do anything. Once you've got one nice smooth coil and you're ready for the next step, what I do is make a whole bunch of coils, and then I wrap them up in a wet paper towel. Because when you're working with coils, you really want there to be quite a bit of moisture in your clay. And as you're rolling those coils out, sometimes you lose that moisture. So I have a wet paper towel, and I keep those coils wrapped up into it until I have enough that I'm ready to start working with things. And if the towels start to get a little dry, I'll just sprinkle a little more water on them. At this point, you're ready to start constructing with those coils. Now you've rolled your coils and it's time to start building your vessel. What I'm going to show you how to do first is a really traditional coil pot. You start with a base. I just rolled a ball of clay, flattened it, made it into a circle, so just a circular slab. And then I've added coil building up around the outside. So to do that, you would score whatever surface you're building on, including the end where we're going to add another coil. You're going to grab the coil that you're going to add. You're going to score the top surface of that as well. And then you'll add slip to all those surfaces. Then you would take those two slipped surfaces and you would build the coil up and around. Now if I build this coil straight up, I center the coil on the coil beneath it, the wall of my vessel is going to go straight up. If I take my coil and I push it towards the outside of the coil below it, the wall of the vessel is going to start to curve outward. If I take the coil and I place it slightly on the inside of the coil below it, the vessel will start to curve inward. So how you place your coil will dictate the form of the vessel that you're making. I'm going to place mine slightly on the outside. I'm going to blend the seam here at the beginning. Then I'll bring this around slightly at the outside so it starts to build outwards a little bit. This is going to be the last layer of my coil, so I'm going to taper this last coil off and have it blend into the vessel around it. At this point, if you like the look of the coils, and you can see what that looks like on the inside of the vessel, you can just take a paintbrush with water and blend your seam out a little bit. So use that paintbrush to help kind of push things together. Make sure you've pushed this coil down to the one beneath it so that it's got good adhesion with that slip. And you just smooth out your coils. I use a paintbrush with water with coils a lot because it allows me to maintain that coil structure, and you'll see we use coils decoratively in the next step, in the next little mini demo here. So if I do that, I can leave the coil structure. And you can see what that looks like on the inside. I haven't smoothed it out yet. Traditionally though, an artisan would smooth the coils down. So I'm going to use this wooden handled loop tool, and I'm going to put my hand inside my vessel to support it, and I'm just going to go around and I'm going to smooth those coils into the space beneath it. So I'll bring clay up and I'll bring clay down to blend those coils into each other. That's going to make a stronger vessel. If I was doing this to make a vessel to hold a liquid or water, I would definitely want to blend, because if I don't blend my coils, the chances that there might be a leak or a little hole in it is higher. So this is going to make a stronger vessel. So I'm just going to go around, I'll blend the whole thing, and then I'm just going to smooth it using my fingers. All right, so that's a simple coil vessel, right? It's starting to bend out. If I keep building layers, I can bring it out more and then back in and do something really interesting with it. This route for coil construction is as old as ceramics, but it's kind of boring, right? Unless I make an interesting shape with it. And there's something else that you can do with coils, which is what we do in our ceramics class. And that's, we use our coils both as a structural element, so to build the form, but also as a decorative element. So I want to show you some different ways that we can use coils in that way. So the first route is we're going to cut a bunch of coils all the same length. Okay, so I rolled out my coils and now I cut a whole bunch the exact same length. Then you're going to score and slip 3 together. And really you could do whatever combination of this works for you, but you'd score it, you would add your slip, and then you'd put groups of 3 together. Then you would take these, you would score your ends, okay, and your sides, and you'd put slip on them, and then you'd put them together. And if you alternate these little squares, it's like making what's called a parquet floor, which you may or may not be familiar with. But I call it a basket weave. It's an easy way to think about it. And I push everything together. Now I didn't slip and score because I want to keep the demo short and simple for you. But you can see what happens if you don't slip and score is they're going to fall apart. But once you've got them together, slipped and scored, you brush them, smooth them out, make sure everything looks nice. And you've built kind of almost a decorative slab. Then you could take this slab and you could put it on to a base like this guy and build it around the outside and start to build up some really interesting form, interesting design and rhythm building up the outside of your vessel. Another way to use single pieces cut to similar length is to make a zigzag. And for that, what you would do is you take a pieces that are all the same length, and you cut each end of each piece at a 45-degree angle, and you want the ends to be the same 45. Okay, so you can see I've done that to this one as well. You would score, score, slip, slip, put those two pieces together and blend, and you've got a pretty cool zigzag happening on your piece. You would blend it on the back side as well. And then you could take this zigzag and apply it to another vessel, or you could bend it around itself and build up a really delicate piece with those zigzags. You could also take a piece like this, flatten off some of the tips, take an existing vessel structure like this slab vessel, and then score those flattened areas and attach it to your surface like so. And you could make a really interesting rim, or you could attach it to the bottom to do some decoration around the base of your piece. So you can really use those those coils in lots of interesting and different ways. Any way that you can think to bend or cut and reattach these coils to each other to create patterns and rhythms, use them. Be creative, have some fun, experiment, and see what you can come up with. So I'm going to show you how to make some swirls and coils and use these little spheres and spaces. I built the base for this piece out of coils and these little spheres because I wanted the base to be as interesting as the sides when it's sitting on a surface. You can see that this would not be a watertight vessel. There's holes in the bottom, so this is purely decorative. So what you need for this is coils that are pretty pliable, so you want them to be a little bit on the damp side. When you build a sphere, or not a sphere, a swirl, what you're going to do is you're going to take one of your coils, and I'm going to taper my ends. So I'm just rolling, I'm pushing a little harder with my middle finger, and I'm just trying to taper those ends out so it comes to a gentle point. It'll help me to build a nicer swirl, and then I'll do the same on the other end. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to put a little slip on it on what I'm going to call the top surface, and then I'm going to roll up my coil. And I would take just water on my paintbrush, and I'm coming in and I'm just blending that slip in. I'm going to check where I want this to connect. I'm going to think about what is going to look nice, how the design is going to work together. So I'm going to place it like so. There's a couple gaps in here, and I'm going to fill those gaps just with a little ball of clay, just to give a little structural support there. So I'm going to take a ball of clay, I'm going to roll it up. I flatten the clay a little bit, and then I'm just going to put a little slip on my edges where it needs to go. I come into those same spaces and I add slip and pressure. You noticed I didn't score those spaces. Scoring it would make it stronger, but I also don't want to add those scored marks to my piece because it's meant to have all of these coils show in the end, and it can be a little difficult to get rid of those scored marks. So if I use pressure and enough slip and I blend things nicely with my paintbrush as I do each step, and I'm just careful as I move through this process, I should be able to make a strong piece. Okay, so I'm going to build up coils in this way. I'm going to add a few more of these spheres around the edge, and then I'm going to build in one flat coil, and then I'll keep building in more swirls. So I'm just going to build for a while. I'll put it in fast forward so it moves through things for you, and you can just kind of see how this develops. So I've added little spheres to it. Now what I want to do is add a coil that's going to come up around this piece and start building the wall up here. I like to have some of these swirls in here, vary the height, and then if I put a few single coils in, it'll start to build some really nice and interesting shapes. How that structure is going to keep building up and up and up. If I find places that I have coils that have cracked, I'll either use water, or if the cracks are quite bad, I'll come in with slip and get those cracks kind of filled in a little bit. I'll use my paintbrush to smooth things out as I go and just keep building up, have some fun, make some interesting sculptures, and see what you can do with this really versatile and creative technique.